Hello, I'm Daniela. Today's video is part 4 in the fabric book series. It's the final video in the series where I show you how to attach a cover to your book. Now, this is a particular type of binding that's stressed in each of the videos. There are many types of ways to bind a fabric book, but for this series, we're binding the book so that the fabric cover is one continuous piece. Now, you can make it up of multiple pieces if you want, like a patchwork. You can embellish it with a fancy spine. But really, the whole point is to have a continuous cover on the book, just so that it will open flat and there'll be a little gap between the pages and the actual cover itself. So let's get started. So now to add the cover to our fabric book. Now, just to refresh, this is using this formula and this method where the pages are sewn together, and that's in the previous videos. These are my templates to use. Now, I wanted to show you just the difference between some of the binding methods, just so they're not confusing. So the way we're binding the book that we've worked on is very similar to this method here. So I just wanted to show you that aesthetically you can add a spine to your book, or you can use a single piece. In today's class, we're going to use a single piece, but I'll just show you a quick way that you can add a spine if you like that appearance. Either way, whether you use the single piece of fabric or you embellish it with the spine, you're going to have this little gap in between the pages and the cover, and that's what you need. And this way, your pages will stay open. So we want to do that here on the book that we've been working on. We have all our fabric pages, and I've attached it just to that piece that's going to hold the book together. But now we need to make a cover. Now, there are different binding methods for other types of books. Here's one where the book is sewn right here on the little area that would be the spine, and the pages don't open flat. You can still press them down, but they don't open flat and flush. And this is another similar method. It's a different binding technique, and I have other videos on that, but that's not the one we're going to use today. And I didn't want to offer any confusion, so that we're using this method here. So now to make your cover, what you want to do is get your fabric, and I like to have something substantial. So I use a piece of quilted fabric. You can use batting, or you can use fabric attached to the batting, or even 2-ply of fabric. You want to cut it so that when you put your book down, you'll put your book down here, you'll flip it over and bring it over here. And I like to add a little extra to start with, because this way when I'm stitching it down, I have a little leeway here. So if you want to create a pocket, which I don't want because I've already stitched these pages here, the front and the back pages, but if I wanted to create a pocket, I would create a pocket so that I could stitch it down. I could either stitch it down top and bottom and have a pocket to tuck things in, or I would cut the fabric and stitch it this way so that I had a little tuckable pocket. If you want to make the pockets, you just keep this fabric longer. And if you don't have long fabric, well, you can sew additional fabric together and then cover it with a strip of fabric to make your spine. But what I like to do is just to use a single strip of fabric, and then I'll embellish it accordingly. If I know I want to put a piece of fabric down for the spine, I'll set the fabric on my swatch and stitch it into place, and that way I'll have a decorative spine. It doesn't serve a purpose other than aesthetics, but that's all it needs to serve, is that aesthetic purpose. So when I have the fabric, I cut it to the size of the height of my book, maybe just a little bit larger. And then I cut it long enough, again, to roll my book around so that I have plenty of fabric. And that's why I like to add a little more fabric so that I can really stitch it, and then I can trim it down on the edges. In order to stitch it down, I like to embellish my fabric swatch here, my cover, and that's what I've done here. So I took swatch of repurposed fabric that has this beautiful embroidery on it, and I just stitched it down. I like to stitch up top here because this is the area that's really going to show through on that little pocket. Then I'll just take my book and set it down, and again just verify that it's big enough, this swatch of fabric, to cover my book, and it is. So from this point on, I'll choose the thread that I want to stitch down on. And I chose two colors here just because this is kind of two-toned. So I'll use this lighter thread to stitch the pages here and this black thread to stitch up here. I start with one side of the book. In this case, this is the first page, but you could easily do this with the last page. I'll line it up into place and then I'll just pin it. Now I like to have my book just shy of the edge of the page here. And then I'll put a pin through it to hold it in place. From here, I'll take my thread and I'll start stitching through. When I stitch through, I'm only going to stitch, and in this case because I'm using the black thread, I'm only going to stitch through the dark area here on my fabric, but I'm only going to stitch the top of my cover. I want to leave that spine unstitched. That gives me some give and some stretch to my book. So I'll take my black thread and I'll start here, and I always bring my thread in the center here. It's just knotted up in between those two pages. And from there, I'll just make small little stitches to tack it down. Now, because this is functional, you can use whatever stitches you like. If you want to make it decorative, go right ahead. If you want to use large stitches, small stitches, that's up to you. But you just want to tack it down enough using whatever stitch you like that it will hold it in place. So I like to just make sure that I'm going through both pages of the book, the first page and the cover. And so I'll just continue to stitch all the way around, checking that I'm really securing this book down. If you don't want to stitch, you can use glue. There's fabric glue for that. You can use fusible adhesive that you use with an iron. You'll just iron it onto the back of your book cover, and then you iron it down onto your pages. Because I have elements in here that I can't iron around, that method would not really work for me. But I also want my book to be stitched, and that's just a challenge and a parameter that I create for myself. There's no wrong way to attach the cover to your book. You do what you like, what works for you. Some people are purists and they want nothing but stitches in their books. Some people like to have fabric collage. Some people like mixed media. There's all variations to this. And the idea is to find the variation that you like. Because the whole purpose of creating a fabric book is about the person creating it. Now, if you're making a fabric book for a child, like a quiet book so that they can use things with, you'll want to stitch it or glue it, and you want to make sure any parts that are attached are really secure. So I'll continue stitching around the cover page and show you how it looks. So here I've stitched all the way around the cover of the book here. I didn't cross over onto this little spine area. I can remove my pin. Now I can still remove any of the elements that I created for my page, but I chose to stitch right down here as well. So I made just a rectangle around my page. I chose to do the rectangle and stitch here as well because my page is heavy and it has these elements, these buttons and this little interactive piece here, and I wanted to make sure it was really anchored well. The rest of this is not attached yet. So now I'm just going to make sure that the cover fits the way I want it to, and it does, and here it is all closed. I'll take my page and hold it in place, and now I'm going to pin it down here. I'll make sure it matches up on the edges, or at least as close to that as I want. I think I'll use 2 pins in this situation here. And now I'm going to stitch on the back cover. Stitch all the way around, once again, using my 2 colors of thread, and I'll show you how it looks. So I've stitched the back cover as well as the front cover. You can see on the inside and the outside. And if I hold my book up and I open the pages, you can see that little gap between the spine, which allows the pages to open flat. So now if I want to peek through my book, I have my first page, and I did this book with a theme of color with various stitches. Some pages are not complete, some have to be sewn together, but they're all here ready to go. I showed various techniques from these pages in other videos that I hope you'll enjoy watching. But this book is full of color, texture, and all these different textiles that I really liked. So that's how I add the cover to my fabric book. I hope you found this series helpful, and it's a fun way to make a very soft, textured book that you can keep in your collection or give as a gift. If you've enjoyed this video series, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And thanks for joining me today.